If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business.
Your protection from deception. This is Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spirit's Journey. We are coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio, being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. We are here in the Heartland holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited. We have our good friend and fellow author, Garnet Schulhauser, with us today. I want to tell you a little about him because he has a fascinating story. He's a lawyer who practiced for over 30 years. With two blue chip law firms until he retired in 2008. And instead of just retiring and putting his feet up, he actually had an amazing encounter with his spirit guide, Albert. And he proceeded to write 4 books based on his experiences with his guide. He wrote Dancing on a Stamp, Dancing Forever with Spirit, Dance of Heavenly Bliss, and Dance of Eternal Rapture, which we're going to be talking about all those books today. And after the release of his book, he has spent time actively going around doing book signing tours and speaking engagements and radio shows. So in addition to an amazing author, Garnet is a level 2 quantum healing hypnosis technique practitioner. That's QHHT. And that's a modality, if you're not familiar with it, that guides clients to experience their past lives and connect with their higher selves. Garnet, welcome.
Welcome, Garnet.
Thank you for having me. How are you today?
Oh, well, we're great and excited to delve in about what Albert, your spirit guide, has been teaching you. So before we do that, let's start with how did you first meet Albert? Because it's a fascinating story.
Well, it was back in 2007. I was still practicing law, and I was strolling down the street one sunny afternoon in May, and all of a sudden a homeless man just jumps out in front of me and stops me in my tracks. And he looked like a typical homeless man. He had long, greasy hair and scraggly beard and dirty, slept-in clothes. But I didn't walk around him like I usually did when I encountered these people on the street, because he had these amazing, dazzling, sparkling blue eyes. And his gaze, he was looking at me, and he seemed to be peering right into the depths of my very soul. And at the same time, he was sending me this wave of pure, unconditional love that was infusing my whole body with an amazing sense of peace and security. Excuse me. So I stood there like a deer caught in the headlights, and it was almost like a bit of a time warp. I had no idea how long I stood there, but it was such an amazing feeling that he was sending me that I didn't really care how long I stood there. Eventually, he broke the spell by saying to me, "Why are you here?" And then he disappeared into a nearby store. And so when I finally collected my wits, I went into the store to try to find him. I had to learn who he was and why he'd stopped me and what he was all about. Went into the store. There was only one entrance and one exit. He was nowhere in the store, nowhere to be seen, and he hadn't come out. So then I went outside in the street, and I walked up and down for several blocks trying to find him, but he had basically disappeared into thin air. So the very next day, I decided I had to go back to try to find him. So I went back to the same street at the same time, hoping to spot him, and after searching fruitlessly for like 15 or 20 minutes, I finally spotted him sitting on a bench all by himself. And so I went up to him and I said, "Who are you, and why did you stop me the other day?" And he said, "I'm a soul just like you, and I'm here to answer your questions and help you on your journey." Well, then my skeptical lawyer brain kicked in, because you can never turn off a skeptical lawyer brain. Anyway, it kicks in, and I said to him, "Well, why do you think you can help me when you can't even help yourself? Because it looks like you've been sleeping on the street for weeks, and you smell like a dead fish." Well, he just gave me a big smile, and he said, "You know, looks can be deceiving." He said, "You look like you're a very successful corporate lawyer with everything under control, but we both know that's just a facade. He said, you know what? If you want to, turn around, go back to your office, and see if you can find the answers to all those questions you've been searching or asking yourself over the last number of years. See if you can find those answers in all those emails waiting for you on your computer. Or you can sit down and have a chat with me. Well, luckily my intuition was screaming at me saying, you got to sit down and talk to this guy. What do you have to lose? Half an hour of your day, no big deal. So I sat down and we began a dialogue. And that dialogue went off and on for several months. I found out in our very first meeting that his name was Albert, and he said that he was really one of my spirit guides. And so basically we had this dialogue, which was basically a Q&A. The first three encounters, he manifested himself as a homeless man. And then after that, he was just a voice in my head, and we communicated by telepathy. And when I said to him, well, why did you show up and confront me as the homeless man? I mean, what was the reason for that? And he said, well, if I had just started talking to you as a voice in your head out of the blue, you probably would have thought you're losing your mind. And so I had to sort of ease you into the conversation by actually showing up in physical form. And in fact, he told me later that I was the only one who could actually see him in physical form. So had there been other people walking down the street that day, they would see me sitting on the bench by myself, talking to myself.
Oh,
that
wow.
can get you into trouble, Garnet.
Yeah, because I was the only one who could see him. In any event, so we had this dialogue, and he was basically, the questions that he answered initially, and then there's a number of other questions I had were all the eternal questions of life, like who am I, why am I here, what's my life purpose, what happens to me when I die. So he answered all those, and interesting enough, his answers, most of his revelations flew in the face of what Christian holy men have been preaching for centuries. Now, I was raised as a Roman Catholic, so I know what the church taught me as a child, and so his revelations sort of don't jive with those at all, which is not a surprise to me. So the conversation was great, and then partway through he said to me, guess what? I'm not just here to satisfy your curiosity. I want you to write a book about what I revealed to you, which sort of, I took a step back because I had not even ever dreamed of writing a book. But he was very gently persuasive. And I've learned since then that if Albert has a recommendation or a suggestion, there's no point in resisting because he's going to win in the end anyway.
But now I had heard, let me stop you on that point. I had heard that guides are here not to, control us or force it, but just to suggest things. So you do have free will. You could say no, couldn't you?
Absolutely. I could say no. And I dragged my feet at first because I didn't really want to get into that. But as I say, he was very, very gently persuasive. He didn't sort of command me to do it. He just said, look, this is really important. I want you to be one of my messengers. He has a number of messengers. I'm just one of them. And he said that, and I'd really like you to consider writing a book. And so I thought, well, what the heck, one book, I'll go for it after a while. And I was really concerned because what's in my book, the first book, Dancing on a Stamp, was very much quite a bit out of character for the people who knew me as a lawyer because I wasn't spiritual or religious or anything. And so I thought there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be rolling their eyes and raising their eyebrows and when they read what I wrote. And I'd probably lose some of them, and I did. But that's just part of what happens. And I lost some friends. I lost some of my former partners who don't talk to me anymore. But I gained a whole lot of new friends, and so overall it was certainly worth it. But then, so after my first book, then he didn't. Then he sprung it on me after my first manuscript. That he said, "Guess what? It's not one book. It's going to be at least 4 or maybe 5." And so by then I was sort of used to. Okay, well, I'm not going to argue with you, Albert. We'll do our best. And so that was how we sort of got off and running. And so then. The first book was basically a Q&A where I'd ask questions that he'd answer. And then after the first manuscript, he sort of disappeared for a while. Then he came back into my life in a very different way. I woke up one night in my bed and I could see this ghost-like ethereal figure standing in the doorway of my bedroom. And I didn't know what was going on. As it moved closer towards my bed, I could see it was Albert. Now he was in astral form. So he looked exactly like the homeless man, except in astral form you're sort of semi-transparent. And so I said, hi, Albert, what are you doing? What's up? And he said, well, I've decided to take you on some astral trips, out-of-body trips. I'm going to take you to the spirit side and to other places on Earth, other places in the universe, because I want you to write about what you see and hear in your next books. And so he then literally reached out and grabbed my astral hand, yanked my body out of my physical body, and I turned around and looked, and my physical body is still sound asleep in bed, but now I'm in astral form, and he said, follow me. So we just sort of rose up through the ceiling. When you're in astral form, you just pass through solid objects like they're not even there. And so we rose up through the ceiling to a point high above our planet, and he let me turn around and look at our beautiful planet. And from that perspective, our planet is really quite a beautiful thing to see, and I wish that everyone could see it from that perspective. That was the beginning of our astral trips. So my second, third, and fourth books were all about these various astral trips that I had with Albert. He would take me to the spirit side, where we would talk to some famous, souls like Moses and Muhammad and Buddha and Jesus and Mary Magdalene and others, and they all had some insight to share, some nuggets of wisdom. I also got to go to other planets in the universe to see some of their civilizations, visited a couple of ET races, and had a number of conversations with animals on Earth, and where they described the plight that they were in, and also had an interesting conversation with Gaia, the consciousness of Mother Earth. So these are all fascinating trips. Albert would just show up. He would never tell me when he was coming. He would show up just unannounced, in my bedroom, and away we'd go. And I'd never know whether he was coming. Sometimes it would be 2 nights in a row, and sometimes I wouldn't see him for 3 weeks. So he had his own timetable, and he'd never tell me in advance what we were going to see. So it was all a bit of a surprise, but very interesting, very fascinating. And I was quite happy to do his bidding by writing my books.
So there's a lot of questions that we get about spirit guides. And over the years in this field, I've encountered a lot of different descriptions of what a spirit guide is and what their role and function is. So with all of your experience with Albert, can you share a little bit about what a spirit guide is and what their function is?
Yeah, well, the spirit guides are just souls like you and I and Kathryn, and everyone else on this planet. And so they're souls that remain on the spirit side beyond the veil, and they act like our coaches. And so everyone has, at least 2 or 3. Some have 5 or 6 or more spirit guides. And before a soul incarnates, that's one of the things they do is they recruit and ask other souls to be their spirit guides. And so the spirit guides are there. They're with us 24/7. They're watching what we do. They know that we put in our life plan, so they know what we hope to experience and what lessons we wanted to learn. And so they're constantly watching us, and every time we come to a decision point, a fork in the road, they're there sending us messages telling us which one we should take based upon what we had hoped to achieve before we incarnated. And so they're really there for us, all the time, try to make sure that our journey is the most fulfilling one that we can enjoy. And the messages they send us, though, I had direct conversations with Albert, and he said, look, this is very unusual. Spirit guides don't usually have a direct sort of one-on-one conversation. Because my conversation with him is like you and I are having right now, and I could clearly understand him, so that I could take notes and put the stuff into my books. For most people, the messages they get from their guides are very subtle. They're like flashes of intuition, whispers in your mind, gut feelings, and the trouble is that a lot of people do not recognize these messages. They don't know they're coming from their guides. They don't know exactly what they mean, and so a lot of people just miss the messages. But our guides are tireless. They just keep on going, and they keep on trying to get us steered on the right course. But at the end of the day, if we follow off course and we take the wrong turn, it's no big deal. We always have a chance to try to get back on. And if at the end of our lives we've missed a lot of the points that we try to experience, it's no big deal. You can come back here as often as you want until you've hit all the bases. So the guides are just they're sort of like a football coach, and they're there to try to give you advice and to try to help you have the best kind of journey that you can possibly experience. And they do change over your lifetime. Some of your guides may be with you from birth until you die. Others will change depending on your particular needs, because your needs, say, as a teenager, are quite a bit different than your needs when you're 50 or 60 years old. And so guides will come and go, and they will change. Now, a lot of times your guides are people that you are part of your soul group. Not necessarily all the time, but they are often part of your soul group. And quite often, they have experienced lives on Earth and sometimes lives with you in previous incarnations. And so they're very experienced in terms of what goes on planet Earth. And so and they're happy to accommodate souls who say, "Look, I'd like to have you as a guide." Chances are you may have been a guide to your spirit guides in one of their previous lives, and so it's kind of a mutual beneficial arrangement. And so that's really the purpose of guides. And the trouble is, a lot of people not only do they not understand or recognize what the messages are, a lot of people don't even know they have guides. And to be honest, I didn't know I had a spirit guide until I met Albert. And so part of the thing is people should really understand that we all have spirit guides, and that they're always sending us messages to get us on the right path. And it's really a challenge for humans to be able to hear the messages and then understand exactly what they're saying.
Well, that's a very interesting concept, that maybe in between lifetimes we actually serve as somebody's guide. I've heard that before, but it's not something that we're here talked about very much. And it really does give an interesting perspective to what's going on in the afterlife.
Yeah, and in fact, Albert did tell me about a couple of past lives where we had incarnations together on Earth, and so we've had some experience. And he wouldn't tell me. I did meet one of my other guides, a soul named Alina, on one of my trips, but he says I have others, and he said it's not in my interest to know who they are now. But what I found out from it's very interesting. I mean, I found out from some of my QHHT sessions when we connected with the client's higher self. Found out one of the questions one of my clients had was, well, who are my guides? And sometimes you'll get a name which doesn't mean anything. In one case, this man, his higher self says, well, out of your guides, 2 of them are somebody that you actually knew in this lifetime. One was a good friend of his who had died in a car accident a few years before, and another one was his father, who had passed away a number of years ago. So there, 2 of his guides were people that he actually had lived with in this current life. So it's kind of interesting. So it can go all over the map in terms of who your guides are, and you generally don't know unless you have a QHHT session who they are. But it's something that's very interesting. A lot of people who know about their guides will ask that question, like, who are my guides? Is it somebody I know? Did I have a previous life with them? What was that life all about? And it's a matter of satisfying their curiosity, but also gives them some comfort to know that, I would think in this case, this client, to know that his father, who he loved very much, was now on the other side and was now one of the spirit guides. So it gave a great deal of comfort.
Yeah, I was going to say, it can be so comforting for people when they lose somebody close to them that, hey, they may be helping me out better on the other side than they could have in the physical if, their body was getting old and stuff. And
exactly, yeah.
And you answered a lot of my questions already, because I was going to say, well, why you? If we all have guides, and I'm sure most people would be dying to have an experience, including myself, like you had to be able to sit down face to face with their guide and actually talk. And I guess, because your guide and you had set up this, agreement that you would write the books, he felt it necessary to give you direct contact with that. But one big question in my mind, since you touched on extraterrestrials, there's a lot of theories out there, conspiracy theories that, some of them are bad and they want to take over the earth, and that other people say, no, they're all good. What have you learned about the role? Are there good ETs, bad ETs? Are they all good?
Albert says they're all good. There's been a number of different races of ETs who have been visiting Earth and observing and monitoring what's going on. He says they're all good, and there aren't any bad ones. No, he did acknowledge that there are some ETs that aren't. They're still very primitive, living on some planets, who are warlike and aggressive, but they haven't been able to travel between the stars, so they haven't been able to visit Earth. And Albert actually says that there's what he called the Galactic Federation, which is sort of an alliance of all the super intelligent races in our galaxy, and the ones that can travel between the stars. And they watch for some of these races, and if they ever get the capability of traveling between the stars, they're going to make sure they don't go out and wage war on other planets. So the ones who have visited Earth are all good. They're benevolent. They mean us no harm. They're here to watch what's going on. And that's very comforting to me, because I know I've heard other people say, oh yeah, there's some evil ETs who are trying to take over the planet and enslave humans. That's just not true. Albert said, look, these guys have such superior technology. If they had wanted to enslave humans and take over the planet, they could have done so eons ago. They're not here to do that. They're just here to watch what's going on. And in fact, I guess part of the thing, which is a bit disturbing, is that they're watching humans to see if we ever develop the capability to travel between the stars, to develop a warp drive, because they're going to watch to see, okay, are these humans going to go out and visit another planet and try to take them over? They would try to prevent that. And the human race as it is now, I mean, we have lots of wars and conflicts and violence, and if we tried to export that to other planets, they would step in and probably disable our warp drive so that we can't get to another star system. And so they're here just to, and they do try to help us. I mean, they try to send us in subtle messages to help us upgrade our technology and improve our lives, but they aren't allowed to directly interfere with what's going on. So they can't use their technology to destroy all of our weapons of mass destruction, for example. They're not allowed to, because of they operate under a directive very similar to what Star Trek called the Prime Directive, which is you can't unduly interfere with the development of an inferior race. And of course, to them, we're an inferior race, and so they have to sort of stand by and watch, which is why they can't sort of they can't just sort of wave their magic wand and get rid of all of our problems. We have to work through them ourselves. So. But they're all well-meaning, and they intend us no harm whatsoever.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. Now, that's very interesting, because you were talking about, the warp drive. Obviously, there has been science fiction stories and movies and things like that people are imagining being able to travel between the stars. Was there any indication from Albert that our consciousness, when we developed the ability to imagine traveling faster than the speed of light, being able to travel between the stars, is that sort of an indication that we are taking those steps toward making that a reality?
Absolutely. He says there's no question that, assuming that we don't destroy ourselves before that point, we will eventually develop warp drive. And he said warp drive, I mean, in very simplistic terms, it's an ability to develop what he called an artificial wormhole around a spaceship that basically folds or creates a warp in the space-time continuum, and that allows you to sort of go from here to a planet 10 light years away very quickly. And that's essentially what warp drive is. And these other ETs who are here, they've developed that. And he said, no doubt humans will someday get to that point. Hopefully, by that time, we will have sort of gotten rid of our abusive and aggressive behavior, so that we will go and search other planets and go to other places in a very peaceful manner, not wanting to wage war or conquer somebody else. And so hopefully we'll have developed to the right stage before we actually develop warp drive.
Wow. So going to the basics of life purpose, which is something I obviously love to talk about all the time. What did you learn from Albert about, when people say, everybody wants to know, what is my purpose? And I know you sometimes talk about life plans. How is that related to purpose, and what is our purpose?
Well, our purpose is really the reason we incarnate on the denser planes like planet Earth, and we can incarnate here, we can incarnate on any other planet in the universe that we want to, in any sort of life form that we want to. And so our purpose is to try to experience what it's like for a physical entity, a life form, to live on the denser planes. I mean, here everything moves very slowly compared to the spirit side, and it's just a way for us to face some challenges and learn some lessons that we think as souls would be good for our development, our evolution as souls. And that's the whole purpose for souls, is to try to acquire knowledge, wisdom, and make ourselves more knowledgeable about what's happening in the universe. And that's our goal. And planet Earth is just one of the schools where we can incarnate, and we can incarnate here as a human or as an animal or whatever we want. And you can have as many go rounds as you want. You can come here for 2 lives and say that's it, I'm finished, or you can come here for 200 lives. Depends on what you want, how fast you learn your lessons, and whenever and how long it takes you to feel that you've graduated from this school and move on to somewhere else. So that's our purpose, is to learn and experience things. And before we incarnate, we each prepare a life plan, and a life plan is just basically a broad blueprint of what sort of life we hope to experience on Earth. So our life plan will indicate where we're born, the identity of our parents and siblings and other relatives. It'll set out the sort of first language we learn, which is basically related to where we're going to be born, and it'll set out some other important events that we hope to experience. But the problem is that once we're born, we don't remember that we have a life plan, and we have free will to act. And so that means that we basically have to go through life hoping that we can hit all the bases, but we're not really sure all the details in our life plan. And that's by design, because Albert said if you had access to the details of your life plan, it would be too easy. You just sort of check off all the boxes as you go through, and there'd be no challenges, no lessons, no decision points to be made, because you know exactly what you're supposed to do. So we don't remember that, and that's just so that we have a more authentic experience on Earth that's not guided by something that we had planned beforehand, in terms of knowing what we had planned beforehand. And so it's very interesting, and that's why we, for a lot of people, they say, gee, I really wish I could know what I had planned for myself, but that's just not going to happen. And so what we have to do is try to rely on the messages from our spirit guides to try to send us on the right course. And of course, they won't tell you exactly what you need to do, but they'll try to sort of coax you to make the right decision when you come to a fork in the road, and then the rest of it sort of unfolds from there.
All right. Well, that does it for the first half. So we are at the bottom of the hour. We're going into a short break. We'll be back in about a minute. You can go to garnetschulhauser.com to find out more about Garnet during the break. You can also go to gfrlive.com to make a contribution to Truth Frequency Radio. This is Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, and I'm going to talk. See you on the other side.
Real people, real radio. Wherever you are, make it TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
We are back from break. Just joining us. This is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries. We're coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. And we are on today with Garnet Schulhauser. He is an author with Ozark Mountain Publishing. And so we are talking about his amazing experiences and travels with his spirit guide, Albert. So Garnet, welcome back to the show. And
thanks for having me again.
And so if souls are free to choose, this is one thing that a lot of people are asking about. So if souls are free to choose where they incarnate, why would somebody come to Earth? Because we have so many challenges here. And specifically, even on Earth, why would they choose to incarn in a country where they're having all of these problems?
Well, that's something that's very difficult for people to understand. And they'd say, well, okay, if I can choose who I'm going to be, why would a person choose to be a blind beggar in Calcutta? Why wouldn't you choose to be Prince Harry? I mean, they're miles apart in terms of the kind of lifestyles they live. And Albert says, well, you don't understand it now, but on the other side, before you incarnated, you know fully well. And we all have certain lessons we want to learn. So, I mean, having a cushy life doesn't necessarily mean you're going to learn very much. In fact, and most of the time, having a harsh life is where you learn more lessons and face more challenges. And so people choose their lives very carefully. It may seem like, I don't believe why you would choose to be a beggar in Calcutta, but the person, the soul who chose that, had some very specific lessons and challenges that they wanted to experience, and it's a challenge. And the fact of the matter is that a lifetime on Earth, I mean, it's not a life sentence. It's a life sentence in terms of Earth time, but on the spirit side, a lifetime of 80 years is like the blink of an eye. And so you're a soul, and you say, okay, I'm going to jump into this challenge, but I'll be back here before you know it. And they look upon it as an adventure, as a challenge. It's like why do people want to climb Mount Everest. Nobody makes them climb Mount Everest. It's a harsh trek up there, a lot of training involved and so on. So you could say, well, I don't understand why somebody would want to climb Mount Everest. It's a challenge to them. Just like a soul on the spirit side says, well, I've had some, maybe a number of earthly experiences. A lot of them maybe didn't have too many challenges. So sometimes a very experienced soul will say, okay, I'm really going to jump into the deep end of the pool here and see if I can swim and take a harsh life. And so not very understandable for us here from our perspective, but on the spirit side, it's entirely acceptable, and people just recognize that. And so souls aren't crazy when they choose to incarnate on Earth. They know exactly what they're getting into, and they just want to face the challenge. They want to say, okay, I want to see if I can take this life, and with all the challenges and the hardships and the trials and tribulations it may have, I want to see if I can get through there and come out of it at the other end with a smile on my face. And so that's why souls choose those kinds of lives.
That goes a lot in alignment with the astrological work that I do, because so often when we see challenging astrology charts, those are the people that actually end up doing a huge amount of awesome work in their life, whereas people who have what we would consider more easy aspects on their astrology charts, a lot of times they don't have that impetus or motive to get up and do something, whether it's being of service or just, developing their own gifts and talents, because there's nothing pushing them. So I think there is something innate about this experience that we want to be challenged. And so, from my perspective, one of the big challenges going on with the Earth is all the pollution, the glyphosate that's being sprayed daily on the crops, depletion of soils. So in your book, you actually described some conversations that you had with Gaia, the consciousness of Mother Earth. So I'm really curious to know, what messages does the Earth have for us besides stop polluting or whatever?
Well, that's one of the main ones. But it was interesting because where I had the conversation with Gaia was Albert took me on one of my astral trips to we hovered over the North Pole and then plunged down through the sea and into a cavern right underneath the North Pole. And all of a sudden I'm hearing this voice speaking to me, which is Gaia. And so she had an amazing story. She said, "Look, I'm the sum total of everything on the planet. I'm Mother Earth, the consciousness of Mother Earth, and she's very fiercely protected of all of her flora and fauna, and she wants to have a balanced and environmentally friendly ecosystem, and which is what she had for a number of years until humans came along and started all their pollution. And so she's distressed at humans. She's not." She loves us as much as she loves all her other animals, but she's very distressed at how we pollute, her soil and her rivers and oceans and lakes and her atmosphere, and how we abuse the other animals on our planet. And she doesn't understand why we do this. She referred to us as that we were like an invasive weed that was slowly encroaching throughout, spreading throughout the whole garden and snuffing out other life in our path, which is not a bad description. And her message was, look at humans. Do you not understand that it's not a good idea to spoil your habitat? This is where you live. This is where you have to live. This is planet Earth. And polluting it, you're not doing anybody any good, and certainly not yourselves. And you have to really change that, because otherwise it'll go really badly for you. And she said, what's happening as part of the result of all of our pollution over the years, and we really didn't start polluting in any great degree until the Industrial Revolution. I mean, before that, in the caveman days, we didn't really pollute at all, other than smoke from the campfire, which was pretty negligible. And so we've been really very good at generating chemicals and noxious fumes and so on since the Industrial Revolution. And that's where she's really taken notice of what we're doing. And she said, you may have noticed recently there's been an increase in the number and intensity of natural disasters on our planet. Volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, wildfires. You look at the wildfires in Australia that in the past couple of months, and that's just all a byproduct of the fact that we're upsetting the balanced ecosystem on our planet. And she says that's going to continue unless you guys sort of change your ways and stop your pollution. And so it was sort of a warning. It was a warning. She was really shooting a warning shot across our bow to say, if you don't fix your ways, it's going to end up very badly for you. And so it was a very heartfelt message. And she doesn't hate humans for what we've been doing. She loves us like all her other creatures. She just wished that we would learn to live in peace and harmony with her other creatures and with Mother Earth herself. And so that was her main message. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head, Kathryn. I mean, what else could she say?
Right. Well, hallelujah. I know myself and many others feel the same way. We want clean waters. We don't want plastic in our oceans. You know, there's just seems like a small group of people who are doing it, obviously, for financial reasons and so forth. So wonderful affirmation.
So speaking of how we treat animals, there was another trip you had also where you spoke to an orca that was trapped in a water park here on Earth. Can you share your conversation with the orca?
Yeah, and it was a nice conversation. I'm in astral form, and the orca is obviously in physical form, but we communicated by telepathy, and Albert somehow enabled us so that I could hear what the orca was saying. And this orca, like all other, the other whales and dolphins and the cetaceans in our world, they're actually very highly intelligent, sensitive, emotional creatures, which humans don't really give much credit for. But they're very intelligent. They don't have any technology, but that doesn't mean they're not intelligent. In fact, in a lot of ways, their intelligence is superior to that of humans. For example, they communicate with each other by telepathy, and humans generally don't. A few can, but most of us can't. And her message was, look at, she was born in the Pacific, as a calf, a orca calf, had free range to roam around the Pacific, but then was captured and put in this water park. And so there she was, trapped in this concrete prison where she had to perform silly tricks to amuse the crowds who came to watch. And she said, our trainers, I don't blame our trainers because they're just doing our job to try to train us, but we know exactly what they want us to do, and we pretend to learn slowly so the trainers can get the satisfaction that they've trained us to do various tricks. But she says, this is awful. This is not a life for somebody who really wants to be in the Pacific Ocean roaming freely, which is what they were destined to do until humans came along. And it's not just her. There's the other cetaceans, other whales. I mean, for a number of years, humans have hunted whales for their oil. That's been mostly banned, but although recently Japan started it up again. Dolphins get trapped in fishing nets, and they get captured and put in water parks as well. Her message was, look, we want to live in peace and harmony with humans. We like to get along with them, but we really wish they would leave us alone to live our lives freely in the ocean without being hunted or trapped or imprisoned in water parks. And she said, look, can you tell your fellow humans that? We try to communicate with humans all the time. We send them telepathic messages. Most of it goes unheard. And so her plea was very much quite similar to what Gaia had said, but this is coming from somebody who is receiving the brunt of human abuse firsthand, and it was very heartfelt plea to humans to look at, please stop doing this. We want to get along with you, and there's no reason for you guys to hunt us or kill us or trap us. We just want to be free. So it was an interesting conversation, and I know that I think a number of water parks now have decided to not capture any more orcas or put them in the water park. I think that's a good movement. I think that's what we need to do, and we just need to have more people who say, look, it's just not fair to imprison these animals. They need to be free.
Well, and I must have been, and I'm sure other people as well, picking up telepathically on that, because I always would feel, a sense of sadness or, something when I would go to a zoo or a water park. And even though, I loved looking at the animals, I felt, I wish they could be free. And so I think in some way a lot of people do pick up on that, but we feel like, well, what can I do, But it comes down, when humans capture the animals, like, we're showing our power over them. And so when I look at what's going on in the world today, where certain people in the tech world are trying to take away our freedom of speech, they're censoring things, governments trying to garner more power in so many of the different countries. It seems like there's such a huge lesson about power, that people are just wanting to have power over others instead of just letting, whether it's animals or people, be free. What is it, and if you could maybe share, if Albert shared anything with you about that, what is the lesson we are trying to learn about power and trying to control others?
Well, the desire for power is just like a number of the other negative emotions, anger, hate, greed. Those emotions are what really causes so much of the problems in our planet. The wars and the crime and the mass shootings and whatever, all the problems that we have. Basically, you can all relate back to negative emotions. And he says, humans just have to learn to stifle their negative emotions and fully embrace love, compassion, and forgiveness. And if we can do that, and we can sort of downplay our negative emotions, then we're going to have a much happier world to live in. And that's really what we have to do. And when we embrace love and compassion, we actually raise our vibrations. Every time we sort of make that move, we raise our vibrations up. And eventually, if we raise our vibrations up high enough, we'll be able to ascend up to Earth in a higher vibration dimension, which people call 5D Earth or New Earth. And that's where we really want to go. But you can't get there if we let our negative emotions just rule our lives. And now, not everyone lets that happen, but there are enough people, especially people in power, people who are in control of governments and countries, who let their need for power or their desire for money, control over other people. That's what is one of the biggest problems that we have. And how you solve that, I don't know. I think we have to do it sort of one step at a time. We have to start with ourselves and make sure that we control our own negative emotions. And I know that's happened with me, because before I met Albert, if I would get cut off in traffic by somebody, I'd be the first one to curse at them and get angry. Now I just sort of like, okay, well, they're on their own journey, and maybe they didn't intend it, but even if they did, who cares? It's not a big deal, So I really try to make an effort to stifle my anger when these things happen. So if we start with ourselves and then try to spread our message through our actions and our words to other people, gradually there will be a ripple effect, a positive ripple effect to spread out to people. And that's what we all need to do. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but it can happen. And if we work hard enough at it, we can get rid of the negative emotions that plague our society. It was interesting. In one of my astral trips, Albert took me to a human civilization on another planet, a very advanced human civilization. And years ago, and this is a very peaceful, harmonious planet where there was no crime, there was no violence, there was no need for money. Everyone just got along with each other. And they said that many years ago, they were sort of like us, where there was lots of wars and conflicts. And what happened was, how they solved the problem was, their scientists discovered that the people who had a greater propensity for negative emotions to lash out at other people was all due to a defective gene. And so over the years, through genetic engineering and selective breeding, they managed to get rid of this gene. So now they have people who basically they don't have negative emotions. And so it was an amazing, idyllic society, something that we can hope to aspire to, because if they can do it, we can as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. And actually, when you're talking about New Earth, you actually took a trip with Albert to visit the New Earth. That kind of reminds me of Douglas Adams in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They had that race of beings that built planets, and actually I think they built an Earth in that story. That was a really good story. But so what was that like, though, when you visited this New Earth? You're talking about this 5D Earth with Albert.
Yeah, well, it basically looks, from space, it looks exactly like our Earth. It's just in a higher dimension. And so when I went there they had a very peaceful, harmonious existence. I spoke with the ancestors or the descendants, of a group of people who had originally been on the old Earth here a long time ago in Central America, and they were fairly peaceful kind of society. And then one day they discovered that there was a barbaric human army encroaching on their territory. They had no weapons because they didn't need weapons, and this army was going to basically take over. And so in the light of that, their leaders orchestrated, basically with the help from spirit guides, a mass ascension up to the New Earth. So I was speaking with descendants of that group. It was a wonderful place. I mean, again, similar to this other human civilization on another planet. They didn't have any crime or violence. People didn't have to work. They could pursue recreational activities or acquire knowledge. They didn't eat animal flesh. All their food was in liquid form, made from plants, and they had a very, very nice existence, and in stark contrast to our planet. Now, the interesting thing is that we don't have to develop warp drive to get to the new Earth. We can actually ascend there, in groups or individually, if we just raise our vibrations high enough to match the vibration level of the new Earth. And Albert says a number of people on our planet over the years have actually made the ascension. In addition to this group from Central America, there's been other people. Some people do it on a one-off basis. Some people do it in groups. But the key there is you have to raise your vibrations, and to do that, you have to get rid of stifle your negative emotions and embrace love. And when you do that, then you can just sort of rise up to this new Earth and have a wonderful existence. I actually met the soul of Albert introduced me to a soul on the spirit side who had made the ascension. In her last life on Earth, she had been a young lady and living in Oregon, and she had a loving husband and 2 children that she loved very much. And then one day her world fell apart because her family was killed when a drunk driver T-boned their car in an intersection. Well, she was devastated, and then very soon her grief gave way to fury not only at the driver, but fury at God for letting this happen. And then she spiraled down into the depths of despair and contemplated suicide. Finally, a friend said to her, you need to go to an ashram and learn to meditate. And so with nothing to lose, she got on a plane, went to Mumbai, ended up in an ashram in southern India, and there she learned to meditate. And gradually, over a period of time, she became more and better at meditating. Soon she lost sort of all her anger and her despair. She ended up eventually forgiving the driver who killed her family, and then she ended up forgiving God. And then one day, when she was in the garden all alone in a very deep meditative trance, she opened her eyes, and she wasn't at the ashram anymore. She had actually ascended to the new Earth. And so her story was that if she can do it, anyone can do it. We just have to put our minds to it. And when I asked her, when you incarnate again, are you going to incarnate back on the new Earth? And she says, I could do that, but no, I'm going to incarnate back on the old Earth so I can help other people, stifle their emotions and learn to ascend. And so, very interesting story. So people do that all the time. And I've had in some of my QHHT sessions, I've had the higher self tell my client that yes, they are destined to ascend. It won't be for a few years, but at some point they will ascend to the new Earth before their physical bodies perish. Now, the new Earth is in the physical plane, much like our Earth, but just at a higher vibration. So people there, they do eventually die, but they've learned how to sort of immunize themselves from most diseases and repair injured tissue. So they live for several hundred years in a very happy sort of, very much like a paradise, and in stark contrast to the stuff that happens on the old Earth. And so Albert's message for us and for humanity is, look, at everyone can do it. You just need to work at it a bit, understand where you need to go. And so I'm hoping that someday he'll give me my ticket to the new Earth. He hasn't promised me anything.
Maybe one more book will get you there, Garnet.
Maybe.
Well, yeah. Well, according to what you just said, that ticket is kind of up to you, right?
Yeah. Now, if I suddenly disappear off the air, maybe I've ascended. So
right.
Don't be alarmed.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll hold that thought for you. So okay. I was curious though, the lady you were mentioning who was meditating in the garden, did she mention if on this Earth did her body dematerialize here and rematerialize there, or was there like a physical form that she left behind here and she went up in her astral body to this new Earth?
She didn't describe in detail how it went, but she didn't leave an old body behind. So she just basically, to the people there, she just disappeared. And so she ended up in like the new Earth, as I said, it's your bodies are physical there. It's not the astral plane. It's a physical plane, but just at a higher vibration rate. So as Albert said, once you raise your vibrations to match those of the new Earth, you just basically rise up, just like a vapor from the ocean rises up to form billowing clouds. I mean, it just happens naturally. You don't have to ask for it. You don't have to, do anything special. It'll just happen. And so it's like a physical ascendancy, basically. Your body here will disappear. And I said to him, a very interesting question. You're probably wondering, well, wouldn't people notice when somebody disappears? And the answer was, no, it's all arranged so that if your next door neighbor suddenly disappears, you won't even remember that you had a next door neighbor. It wouldn't, to you, it wouldn't be like he disappeared. He just never was there. And so it's sort of all arranged so that people aren't suddenly reporting to the police, my wife just disappeared, It's kind of hard for us to understand, but he says it's all arranged so that people can just make the ascendancy and they won't really be missed.
Wow, that sounds a lot. I was going to say that's
good or bad, but yeah.
I was going to say that sounds a lot like the rapture, where the book of Revelation talks about in this case, a lot of people are going to be disappearing and just kind of vanishing. So it's interesting that, there's this, prophecy in Revelation a lot of people are talking about. It's very similar to that experience that she had that you were talking about, just on a much smaller scale. Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes groups can do it, but most of the time it's just individuals. And in that case, it was just her. And so it was a very interesting story, and it's really very heartwarming to understand that good things can happen to people if they just really focus on it. And hopefully, eventually, everyone will end up being on the new earth. But it may take a while.
Now, we have a few minutes here, so I did have one question too, because you talked about when souls die here, that their spirit goes to what you call the spirit side. And I know a lot of people would consider that very unjust, that like people who have done very bad things here would end up in the very same place as someone like Mother Teresa or Gandhi. So can you speak to that just a little bit before we go?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it does seem unjust to a lot of people, because people think that if somebody is a serial killer, that person should end up being punished not only here on Earth but in the afterlife. The problem is that in the afterlife there's no other place to go. It's the spirit side. There is no hell. There's no purgatory. Those are just fictions invented by religious holy men. And so everyone goes back there. But you see, the thing is that even if somebody does something really bad, if somebody murders you here, and when you're both back on the spirit side, you won't feel any hatred towards this person, this soul, or any need for revenge or anything else, because things are just different on the spirit side. There's nothing but unconditional love. So there's no negative emotions whatsoever. And the souls on the spirit side recognize that a life on Earth, very much similar to somebody on Earth here being in a play. And if you're, if you're in a Broadway play, and the script calls for you to stab and kill another actor in the play, when the curtain goes down, you don't get arrested by the police. And the person because it didn't really happen, and the person that you stabbed in the play doesn't hate you, and in fact, the two of you will probably go out for a bite to eat after the play. And that's how the souls in the spirit side look at it, and they say, okay, well, we were both down there on Earth, and you killed me, and you shouldn't have, but that was just, your negative emotions got out of control, and so now you're here, and I don't have any animosity towards you, because I know that you're probably going to try to go back to Earth in a different life and try to be better the next time. So that's how they review it. And so that's why murderers and terrorists go back to the spirit side, because that's the only place they can go.
Well, that's an awesome thought to ponder as we conclude the show, Garnet. And I'm completely fascinated by your work and your books, and I'm sure other people are. So do you want to remind people again, if they want to read your books, talk to you, how could they find you?
The best place is my website, which is garnetschulhauser.com. That's not easy to remember, but if you Google Dancing on a Stamp, you'll be able to find my website. There I have descriptions of all my books. There's convenient buy links there to all the online stores like Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I also have links to my social media sites, and you can download a free excerpt of each of my books. And if you want to contact me, they can just send me an email. My email address is there on my website. It's contact@garnetschulhauser.com.
All right. Well, thank you for being on our show once again, Garnet. It's always amazing having you on. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you, all of you, for listening with us. And please connect with us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio. This has been Spirits Journey Live on Truth Frequency Radio. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn, guys.